Madam President Arroyo, Prime Minister Hsien-Loong, and I should say not only Prime Minister of Singapore but Chair of ASEAN, Prime Minister Badawi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very special session this evening. I think it's the first time in the forum that we have a regional grouping represented by its leaders here. And it's also a special timing for it, because we welcome here the representatives of the ASEAN countries. And the heads of state from ASEAN took the historic step, as you know, of signing a charter late last year, which commits the ASEAN countries to principles of democracy and human rights. And the last ASEAN summit under your chairmanship, Prime Minister, and coinciding with ASEAN's 40th anniversary, was also a moment where you signed other important documents, such as an agreement on environmental protection, the Singapore Declaration, and also you adopted a blueprint for the ASEAN Economic Community. When we looked in the past at Asia, we had a tendency to look at India, of course, what we did very intensively 2 years ago, at China. We have also Japan very prominently represented. But there is a fourth pillar of Asia, and that's ASEAN. ASEAN, comparing in its population to the European Union with over 500 million inhabitants, with many ethnicities, and in some way, Prime Minister, I would say you are also a test case for how the world should live together, because you incorporate so many different ethnicities, languages, economic life standards. So the world must be very interested and very committed also to what's going on in the future of ASEAN, what's going on in ASEAN, and must have a strong engagement into ASEAN in the future. I now would like to hand over the chairmanship of this meeting to David O'Reilly, one of the co-chairs of the World Economic Forum here.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. And it's my pleasure to introduce the panel that we have this evening. And I will start by talking about President Arroyo, who I heard at last year's APEC summit in Sydney make the comment that the more bridges we build, the more people can cross into new lands and new ideas. And Mrs. Arroyo has taken measures to build economic bridges that have led to a rebounding Philippine economy. So please welcome President of the Philippines, President Arroyo. Prime Minister Lee, current chair of ASEAN, says Singapore is taking full advantage of the favorable conditions by both deepening cooperation with its neighbors and pursuing opportunities in the wider Asian economy. Please welcome Singapore's Prime Minister Lee. Since becoming Prime Minister of Malaysia, Abdullah Ahmad Badawi and his government have set out to transform Malaysia's economy by encouraging a more competitive and dynamic financial system. Please welcome Malaysia's Prime Minister Badawi. Stephen Green leads an organization that began in Hong Kong and Shanghai in 1865. HSBC is now one of Asia's largest banking institutions, one of Europe's biggest banks, as well as the largest international emerging markets bank. Please welcome Chairman of SBC, Stephen Green. We also have a pleasure to be joined by so many representatives of the other ASEAN countries. So please welcome Second Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Brunei, Pihen Lim. Behind me here, please. Senior Minister and Minister of Commerce of Cambodia, Minister Cham. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, Minister Ryuda. The Minister of Planning and Investment of Laos, Minister Hsien-Loong. Thailand's Deputy Minister, Prime Minister Kosit. Vietnam's Deputy Prime Minister Hai. And last but not least, Secretary General of ASEAN, Dr. Sirin. I was really excited by the opportunity to chair this panel today because when we think of Asia, we think of the major countries that attract so much attention in Asia. We think of India, we think of China, and we think of Japan. But Prime Minister Lee has referred to the ASEAN countries as the fourth pillar of Asia. And collectively, this is a very powerful group, 600 million people, combined GDP of over $700 billion of GDP, healthy economic growth, a wide variety of economies, a wide and diverse commodity base, and a very active and vibrant part of Asia that's represented here this evening. So what we would like to do is kick off our session here with a very short film. So if we could have the film, please.
Welcome to ASEAN.
ยินดีต้อนรับสู่อาเซียนJerman ay maju tayo. Ako, dito lang sa ASEAN. Ligayang pagdating sa ASEAN.
ASEAN, 10 nations with a shared vision. At the heart of Asia, ASEAN's dynamic and resource-rich economies are driving its 21st century plan for a common future of growth and stability. With increasing trade and investment across Southeast Asia, ASEAN is now integrating its resources to bring the region even closer together. Established in 1967, ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, represents the collective will of its members to unite in friendship and cooperation in order to secure peace, progress, and prosperity. By providing platforms for crucial political engagement with the international community, ASEAN has strengthened the bonds of trust and established a common regional identity. Today, the ASEAN region has a population of more than 550 million, a combined GDP exceeding $1 trillion and total trade approaching $1.5 trillion. Encompassing an area of 4.5 million square kilometers, ASEAN enjoys a unique geopolitical and geographical position at the crossroads of Asia. With close proximity and good ties to the emerging powerhouse economies of China and India, and the Republic of Korea and Japan. Key to ASEAN's internal integration is the blueprint for an ASEAN economic community, which maps out measures towards the creation of a single market and production base by 2015. ASEAN is also addressing other issues, such as social development and matters of global concern, from environmental sustainability to climate change. Building upon its political stability, its economic strength, and its cultural diversity, ASEAN has progressed from consolidation to an even greater unity. At the 13th ASEAN Summit, the region's leaders signed the ASEAN Charter, which will help tackle challenges that lie ahead. This is the vision for the future, one that will become reality by 2015. A stronger, more competitive and effective ASEAN. One ASEAN at the heart of a dynamic Asia.
Before I call on our panelists, just let me make an observation. We have a wonderful group of representatives of ASEAN here tonight, and unfortunately not everyone will have a chance to make a presentation, but our four principal panelists will obviously do that. When the questions and answer period comes, I would ask that you keep your questions relatively brief so that we have a chance to answer them. This is Switzerland, and I'm under instructions that we are going to maintain a good schedule here tonight. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce this year's chair of ASEAN, Prime Minister Lee of Singapore. Prime Minister Lee.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Chairman, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this plenary session celebrating the 40th anniversary of ASEAN. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary against the background of a vibrant Asia. China and India are both taking off, giving a tremendous boost to the whole region. And ASEAN is benefiting from this. But this Asian Renaissance is not just about China and India. Because the 10 ASEAN countries, together we form an important part of Asia. And in recent years, generally, ASEAN countries have done well. Among the Indo-Chinese countries, for example, Vietnam has been liberalizing and taking off. Laos has been benefiting from a strong global demand for commodities. And among the older ASEAN countries, oil producers like Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia are benefiting from high energy prices. Philippines is prospering with strengthened public finances. Thailand has been enjoying strong exports and is now forming a new elected government. And in Singapore, we are enjoying strong momentum from riding the regional growth and from our own economic restructuring and upgrading. Within ASEAN, we've progressively integrated our economies. So we formed an ASEAN Free Trade Area, AFTA, an ASEAN Investment Area, and we also have an Open Skies Agreement between the ASEAN capitals, which will come into effect by the end of this year. Beyond ASEAN, we are strengthening ties with key partners and doing our part as stakeholders in the international community. For example, we are addressing pressing global issues like climate change. Indonesia hosted the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change conference in Bali in December last year. And our countries are working together to reduce energy intensity, to deploy clean and renewable energy, and to protect the region's forests and biodiversity. Apart from climate change, we are participating in regional forums, building an architecture of cooperation throughout Asia, for example, in the APEC and in the East Asia Summit. Beyond the region, we are actively pursuing free trade agreements with other countries and regions. So we are negotiating with India, Australia, New Zealand, and the European Union, free trade agreements with each one. And with 3 countries, we have already concluded free trade agreements, China, Korea, and Japan. Our overall strategy is to open up and link up with the world. We believe this is the best way to achieve economic progress, improve the lives of our people. We know there are risks to globalization. Just look at the recent financial turbulence over the last week, and you can't be in any doubt of that. This is not the first, nor will it be the last time that the region is hit by such financial instabilities. But therefore, all the more, ASEAN has to be strong and cohesive. We cannot just be 10 disconnected, scattered national economies. At our summit meeting last year, the countries signed the ASEAN Charter. It's still a long way off compared to the European Union and their mini-constitution, but it's a major step forward for ASEAN. We will have a more rules-based governing framework. We'll have a streamlined decision-making process, focusing on implementation and results. And as we implement this charter, it will help us to realize our vision of a vibrant ASEAN community. And of all the aspects of the community, one of the most important and immediate aspects is an economic community. So we adopted a blueprint too to establish this economic community by 2015. The blueprint sets out clear commitments, targets, and timelines. For example, to eliminate tariffs and trade barriers, including non-tariff barriers among member countries, or to implement smooth and efficient business processes across borders, and thereby create a single market and production base with a free flow of goods, services, investments, and skilled labor. This is our roadmap to integrate and strengthen our countries. There's wide diversity and disparity among ASEAN members. We are in different situations, different priorities and perspectives. We acknowledge that. But we all concur that integration is vital to us, and therefore we are here today to share with you the ASEAN story. Our fundamentals are strong. We are resolved to make ourselves relevant to the new Asia. So when you think about Asia, besides South Asia and East Asia, please also think about Southeast Asia, about ASEAN. Thank you very much indeed.
And I'd like to turn the floor over to President Arroyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I'm thrilled at the prospect of a vibrant ASEAN. We hold great hope for the ASEAN Charter. It was a great leap forward that moved ASEAN one step closer to a true union of committed nations. My colleagues on stage with me are part of the vanguard of change in Asia. Without their leadership, we would not be able to turn Asia or ASEAN into a truly positive, dynamic force for positive change. And we applaud them for their leadership. We need ASEAN to become a truly economic and political force to face the challenges of the global economy. We welcome the rise of China and India, but we also recognize that we need to be a countervailing force. And this week's economic news underscores why ASEAN needs to bolster its impact. ASEAN has the potential to strengthen our respective countries and region and lend more stability to the global economy as well. Yet, only time will tell how historic the ASEAN Charter truly will be. For better or for worse, though, we must move quickly if we are to make a difference on the economy. The economy won't stop until ASEAN becomes more fully formed. This is true on the economy. It's true on issues such as human rights and climate change. And while common interest has brought us together and hopes are high, ASEAN must stand united and meet these high hopes if we are to thrive and help change our region and the world. I say this in reference to human rights, where we truly believe we must attain a level of democratization within ASEAN if we are to work collaboratively for the common good. And we refer here to Myanmar. We must see political reform. We must see Aung San Suu Kyi released, and now. Our friends in ASEAN know our Philippine position on this. Not only are we committed to seeing reform, political reform in Myanmar, our Senate will not ratify the ASEAN Charter unless they see real political reform take place in Myanmar. So we must work together to make the tough choices to make ASEAN real and Aung San Suu Kyi free. As for climate change, it's an opportunity for ASEAN as much as a challenge. We have the people, the ingenuity, and innovation to bring to bear and help solve this crisis through government action as well as through market innovation and response. Entire industries are yet to be built to mitigate climate change. It might as well be Southeast Asia that takes the lead to help itself and help the world. The title of this session refers to the emerging Asian community. But I hope the day will come when we will no longer be called emerging. It's time for us to have arrived at our destination. There's nothing standing in our way but our own determination and political will to turn the idea of ASEAN into the reality of ASEAN. We can and must transcend politics as usual and band together in ASEAN to change our respective nations, our region, and by extension, the world. Thank you.
Thank you, President Arroyo. Now I would like to call on Prime Minister Badawi. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, having heard Prime Minister Lee and President Gloria Arroyo, I have to put my notes aside, because if I do that, if I read my notes, I'll be repeating some of the points that my colleagues have already stated. I agree with both of them, certainly. But there is something that perhaps I should say, from another, looking at ASEAN from another dimension. Why is it that ASEAN has succeeded? ASEAN is a successful regional organization. And we have common beliefs that the ASEAN region, our region, the Southeast Asia, must be a region of peace, of prosperity, of neutrality. It must be free of nuclear. And at the same time, we have been able to get together because we believe in the principle that not only of mutual respect, not only of understanding that if we are together, we will become stronger as a region, but at the same time, we believe that it is important to respect the the principle of not interfering in the internal affairs of member countries. Perhaps this is also one reason why we are having such problem with how to deal with the Myanmar issue. And at the same time, we believe that the future of ASEAN is a future of prosperity for which we must work. Of course, ASEAN was formed at a time when the situation in Southeast Asia was regarded as one that might not be safe, because the region that is today ASEAN, within that region, the members of ASEAN, for example, Vietnam. Vietnam, if I could say that they have intentions which are certainly not the same as ours. There was a fear of invasion from Vietnam. There was a fear of China. But today, things have changed, because we believe that ASEAN must continue to expand. ASEAN must continue to establish a relationship with important countries in East Asia. So ASEAN, from the beginning with a membership of 5 countries, that will be Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. Now we have ASEAN 10, practically all the countries of Southeast Asia. And to strengthen our position, we believe that we should also establish linkages, and hence we establish relationship with countries of China, of Japan, and of Korea. We have, this is what we call ASEAN plus 3. The 3 are very powerful East Asian economies. But ASEAN also have another arrangement, we call it ASEAN Post-Military Conference, PMC. And that means that we have ASEAN, the ASEAN friends are, we have United States, we have Canada, and we have Australia, we have New Zealand, this ASEAN plus 3, we have also, no, this is the ASEAN PMC, and we have Europe, EU, and we have who else? Hsien-Loong? These are the dialogue partners, as you choose the word dialogue. These are the ASEAN dialogue partners, and therefore the networking is very, very big, and this has really strengthened us in a way, because we have benefited from this networking, from these ASEAN Plus cooperations. And it is on this basis that today ASEAN, I can say, has emerged to be a very strong regional groupings. We have been successful in in getting China to be closer to us. I remember that. Malaysia was responsible for getting China to come to Kuala Lumpur on the occasion of the meeting of the ASEAN foreign ministers. There was the beginning of China's, if I can use the word, involvement with ASEAN. China was regarded as a threat, but China today is a friend, a very important friend of ASEAN, one of ASEAN plus 3 countries. And because China is doing very well today, and ASEAN has regarded China as a friend, all ASEAN countries have benefited from China's growth today. And the other point is this, it was well known before that the Southeast Asia was a region that potentially could erupt into a kind of conflict. The overlapping claims in the Spratly in Southeast Asia. China claims a huge area, practically all the islands in the South China Sea, and Malaysia has also its claim, and other ASEAN countries. And it was if this overlapping claims that involve many ASEAN countries and China is not well managed, then we will be facing a very serious problem in Southeast Asia, in South China Sea. But because of the relationship between China and ASEAN has been good, China has recognized that the principle of not enforcing claim by resorting to military means is a very, very important principle. That that all of us, we must not resort to emphasizing our claim militarily. We must not create a state of tension because of this issue. And at the same time, we also believe that if there is any need to resolve the problem, it must be on the basis of diplomatic negotiations. And because of this arrangement, then we have now experienced some comparative peace. And that issue of overlapping claim today is not an issue that we are worried about. And China to us is not a threat. China to us is a friend. But India is emerging very strongly as a new economy. And it would be in the interest of ASEAN to also develop strategic relationship with India. And India today is very much a member of the various ASEAN processes. India is also part of the ARF, ASEAN Regional Forum on Security. And Australia and New Zealand has also been brought in together to be members of the East Asian Summit. The East Asian Summit is a very important development, and that certainly will position ASEAN as a group with other bigger countries around East Asia plus Australia and New Zealand. And because of this, I would like to say that the future of ASEAN will be comparatively peaceful, and ASEAN will continue to grow and to grow as an economic region, and there's a future prosperity with the ASEAN Charter. The ASEAN integration will become a reality, we hope, as soon as possible. There will be ASEAN Economic Community, ASEAN Political Security Committee, ASEAN Social Community, not committee, community. And the integration of ASEAN will make ASEAN into a very strong economic and social grouping. And within ASEAN, there is a multi-ethnicity. We have ASEAN, where the population of if I can use the word, this big population of Chinese or ASEAN people of Chinese origin, and the Malays who are Indonesia, Brunei, and Malaysia. And at the same time, we have the population of Indians in practically all ASEAN countries. Talking from the point of view of religion, the Muslims, Indonesia is a country with the largest Muslim population, And in Malaysia, the Muslim population is majority, and so is in Brunei. But there is also a very huge, big population of Buddhist community. And we have also Hindus in this region, Christians in this region, the Philippines, for example. But how is it that we managed to live together, to work together, to cooperate? It's because we believe that if we are to ensure that our future is successful and our future is safe for all of us, there is no other choice except to cooperate. There is very strong ASEAN cooperation based on mutual respect, and there is moderation. That is why so far you have not heard of any problem of any kind of conflict, religious conflict or ethnic conflict within or in ASEAN. This has not happened, and I think ASEAN is a good place for any other country intending to invest and intending to establish trade with us. It's a very peaceful, dynamic place, a peaceful that is growing in prosperity, and the future is a good future. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We've now heard from 3 of the ASEAN leaders, and I would now like to call on Stephen Green, who's present in 7 at least of the 10, if I understand, at least of the countries, to kind of respond and comment from a business perspective. Stephen?
David, thank you. It's a great privilege to be here alongside the political leadership of ASEAN at a very exciting time in its development. As you mentioned, we as HSBC are in 7 out of the 10 ASEAN countries, and we've been there a long time. In the case of at least one of them, we were the very first bank there, and in the case of 3 of them, we've been there for over a century. And that gives us a perspective. We're also a bank that's present in a number of the other regional economic and political groupings around the world. We do business in NAFTA, in CAFTA, and in the European Union. And when you think about the similarities and differences between those different regional groupings, in a way the differences are more obvious than any similarities. They are different stages of development, they have different objectives, but I would submit that there are some underlying commonalities. And one of them is, and I draw particularly the similarity here between the goals of ASEAN and the goals of the European Union, actually, that you need to have a very long-term focus as you think about the development of a community. I liken the European Union to the building of some of those great and glorious European cathedrals. The interesting thing about them is that those who laid the foundation stones didn't expect to live to see the completed building, and didn't have a clear idea of what the completed building would necessarily look like. It would evolve over the generations. And I think something similar is true of regional social, economic and political groupings. This is a long-term project. You start out on a journey, and ASEAN has just passed a very important milestone in terms of the blueprint for the ASEAN Economic Community by 2015 and the Charter. But you don't necessarily know what the final destination will exactly look like. All you know is that the journey is worth travelling on. And I think that's true despite the fact that there are obvious disparities within the ASEAN grouping, as there are, of course, with NAFTA, CAFTA and the European Union. You can look at the disparity of size. In the case of ASEAN, of course, you have one of the world's largest countries, Indonesia, with a population of over 220 million. You have one of the world's smallest countries in Brunei, with a population of a little less than 400,000. You have one of the world's very wealthy countries, Singapore. You have some of the very poorest parts of the world also within ASEAN. You have countries of very different stages of economic development, therefore. What they do have in common, however, is very considerable growth potential. And indeed, actually, virtually all of ASEAN has been enjoying considerably rapid growth in recent years. And indeed, our forecast is, notwithstanding any short-term disturbances due to the world's financial markets, that the growth prospects of ASEAN for the next generation are very strong, as indeed they're strong for Asia as a whole. So I don't think that the existence of disparities in ASEAN constitute a roadblock in and of themselves to the closer economic integration. Indeed, they create potential. There is obvious potential when you look at the trade and investment patterns of ASEAN. One of the striking facts is how rapidly trade has grown and how strong investment flows have been. But it is interesting to note also that it's very difficult to find evidence of the trade flows having grown faster so far as a result of ASEAN compared with the rest of Asia. Indeed, what it looks like is a story of the whole growth of Asia being reflected in the growth of the individual countries of ASEAN rather than the benefits of economic integration showing through yet. However, they are there. McKinsey have done a study of ASEAN's prospects, and they calculate that the closer economic integration over the coming years is worth about a 10% increment on the GNP of the region as a whole. That's a very significant benefit and one to go for. And from a business point of view, and David, you asked me to comment particularly on this from a business perspective, it is clearly the trade and investment possibilities that come from increasing integration wherein lie the benefits to business and the opportunities to make a contribution to economic development. Fragmented approaches in different countries, different rules, different regulations, absence of level playing field are things that we deal with, of course, in many countries around the world, but there's no question that the more that this can be integrated, the smoother the playing field can be made over the next few years as ASEAN comes together economically, the better it will be for companies as they think about where to invest, in comparing ASEAN with different countries, other regions in the world, and as trading develops within the region, but also with the rest of the world. Definitely, it's this trade and investment perspective that will be uppermost in business people's minds as ASEAN goes forwards. I believe that it's inevitable that as things develop, it will be necessary for ASEAN to make sure that it has the appropriate central bureaucracy, if I can use that phrase in its non-pejorative sense for a moment, in order to further these goals. But of course, bureaucracy is a double-edged word, and that also reminds us, and those of us who are citizens of the European Union are constantly reminding ourselves of the risks of bureaucracy in the negative sense. The central support of economic integration needs to be there, but it needs to be there in a way that is facilitative and not bureaucratic and creating simply an extra level of approval and control. Otherwise, you do the reverse of achieving integration, you actually slow things down. If there's one other thing I just want to mention in my very short allocated 5 minutes, David, it's that there are clearly other aspects of integration than just trade and investment. And whilst you might be surprised to hear it, businesses are interested in those other aspects as well. One that's particularly in my mind is climate control, climate change, I should say. And I guess that's in the minds of so many of us these days, and quite rightly too. It's a major challenge. Speakers before me this evening have already referred to it. It is a big opportunity and challenge for ASEAN as it is for the whole of the rest of the world, and it's one where the interests of ASEAN dovetail with those of the rest of the world. Over 10% of the world's tropical rainforests are in ASEAN. Some of the world's richest biodiversity is in ASEAN. The opportunity to protect and preserve and enhance that for future generations, both for the citizens of ASEAN itself and also for the wider world, I believe is there. I happen to have had the good fortune and great honour to have been in Brunei just a couple of weeks ago. We were there to celebrate HSBC's 60th birthday, and this was a great occasion to be there. I took the opportunity of meeting with a number of people who have been involved in one of the very practical outcomes of integration and working together amongst ASEAN countries, namely the Heart of Borneo project. This is a project to help conserve the tropical rainforest of the island of Borneo, which of course involves the cooperation of 3 of the ASEAN countries. I'm delighted and honoured to say HSBC has provided some of the support to setting up an office to help this initiative get going. And if you wonder why a businessman will be focusing on this, it's because I think the sustainability of our environment is of interest to all of us, but including those who think about the development of their own business and ways of making sure that the business can make a suitable contribution, because sustainability has 3 senses to it from a business perspective. Of course, we have to sustainably grow our profits, or our shareholders will become uncomfortable, to put it mildly. But in order to do that, we have to grow sustainable relationships with our customers throughout the region. And in order to do that, increasingly these days, we have to pay attention to our responsibility to the environment within which we do our business. Our customers expect this, our colleagues throughout the region certainly expect it, and increasingly our shareholders expect it. And therefore we too will provide the support and encouragement and help wherever we can as the political leadership of ASEAN brings this issue into focus and works together on the integration of it for the future of ASEAN. So this business of economic and social integration is a many-sided thing, and it's a long-term journey, but the journey has been begun, and the Charter was a major milestone on that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for those remarks. I appreciate them. I think I'll use the chair's prerogative to put the first question to Prime Minister Lee. And actually, Stephen gave me an opportunity to build on one of the comments that he made. He referred, Prime Minister, to the need for, I think, an effective and efficient bureaucracy to manage the ASEAN in a way that's constructive. And I thought maybe this is a question that you would like to address, since this must be on the minds of many of you.
Well, indeed, the whole purpose of having an ASEAN Charter is to build up an effective organization, which means you must have the bureaucracy, it must be solid, you must have the rules so that people take the organization seriously, and you must have the vision so you know in which direction this organization is going to go and get closer together. And one of the things we did was to institutionalize the ASEAN Secretariat and to raise the level of the Secretary General so that he's on par with the ministers in the countries of ASEAN, and he can play a more effective role tracking the many things which are going on at the same time and holding us to what we committed to do so that what we said we wanted to make happen will happen. And that is a reason why we have a new Secretary General after who has just taken over, His Excellency Mr. Surin Pitsuwan from Thailand, who was previously the Foreign Minister in Thailand. And I think he has every intention of strengthening this core, and maybe Surin might be able to say something about that.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Excellency Mr. Chairman. It is a privilege to serve the 10 governments as the first Secretary General under the Charter, and as you rightly put it, it is going to be a rule-based organization. The Secretariat is going to be strengthened, and I have let it be known that from now on the Secretariat is going to be a networked Secretariat, and that is to do networking in this kind of place in order to bring in as many organizations, as many individuals who have the vision and the like-mindedness to make sure that the one region of the world that is growing and doing well will prosper and will succeed, so that the world will have one less region to worry about. Thank you.
If I may put another question, and this is to all the panelists, I think. During this week at Davos, climate change has come up a number of times, from the very opening session. And it was raised by President Arroyo. It's been raised by Stephen in his remarks, and a number of you. Will the new ASEAN be a more effective manager of the climate change issue?
Well, it's a very difficult problem. It's one which ASEAN has to grapple with like all other countries. But I think a more effective organization will enable us both to be better at negotiating in the global framework a deal which has to emerge post-Kyoto over the next 2 years, and also in working together to deal with environmental issues, forest deforestation, forest degradation, to deal with the problem of forest fires, to deal with problems of transboundary haze. Environmental issues do not respect international boundaries, and unless countries are able to work across these international boundaries, we are going to lose, and that is not our intention. But maybe Prime Minister Abdullah, you want to say anything?
I think that's okay. You covered all that.
Thank you. Are there any of the other panelists who would like to comment on the climate change issue? Okay. We are also taking questions from the floor. And I believe there are microphones available, and if somebody has a question from the floor, please let us know, and we will have the appropriate person answer. Let me look and see. There is a microphone here. Please.
My name is Jim Leap. I'm Director General of WWF, the Global Conservation Organization. And I want to just note the theme of environment and conservation running through the conversation already and applaud that. When these leaders met, when ASEAN had its summit in November, you signed a declaration on environmental sustainability, and it embodied a commitment to action on climate change, which we've already heard about, and also the recognition that Prime Minister Lee just mentioned, that regional resources need to be managed cooperatively. One example of that's the Heart of Borneo initiative, which Stephen Green already mentioned. Another is the Coral Triangle Initiative, which involves Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and their neighbors to conserve the richest coral reefs on Earth. And I wonder if one of you could comment on how you see those initiatives going forward. Thank you.
Maybe Hassan, because I'll ask Foreign Minister Hassan from Indonesia to reply, because Indonesia has a big stake in these projects and also hosted the UNFCCC conference in Bali recently.
I think we have a microphone. Let us. Thank you. Foreign Minister.
Thank you very much. Indonesia has the privilege to host the UN conference on the Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the ASEAN declarations on sustainability of the environment was issued in the run-up to the Bali conference, certainly has contributed to the adoptions of what we call the Bali Roadmap, which provides a guide to the negotiations on climate change until 2009. In that context, Indonesia has initiated two initiatives. One on tropical forests, we call it F11, which turned out some 34 countries participated. We agreed to develop cooperations with the developed countries as well as the business community to address the forest degradations, deforestations, and promote reforestations. Likewise, we also initiated the Coral Triangle initiatives. Both forests and marine space are rich biodiversity resources and important things to climate change. So we are encouraged by the positive response from our partners, the developed world, but also from the business community. I think we should not wait until 2012 to mitigate climate change. We should act now, and I think reforestation is an important area that in the span of 5 years we can reduce and mitigate the effect of greenhouse gases. So we are in ASEAN working very hard with the international community to address it, and as I said, we are very encouraged by the response.
Thank you, Foreign Minister. President Arroyo?
Yes. Stephen talked about Heart of Borneo. I want to talk about the other very, very big project within ASEAN, and that is the Coral Triangle Initiative. We are very supportive of the Coral Triangle Initiative, and for those who are not so familiar with the region, let me just say what is this Coral Triangle Initiative? What is the Coral Triangle? The Coral Triangle is the world's epicenter of marine life abundance and diversity. It is home to the world's largest population of commercially important tuna species, among others. It supplies 50% of global tuna production. Now, the Coral Triangle covers 6 countries: the entire Philippines, I believe the entire Timor-Leste, and parts of Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and Solomon Islands. That's why it's a triangle. And what is a Coral Triangle Initiative? It is an initiative of both governments and the NGOs and the private sector to ensure the health of the region's natural treasures and the millions of livelihoods that depend on that Coral Triangle. The Philippines is hosting a senior officials meeting in May 2008, where we hope to tackle the technical work together. So we look forward to working with all the Coral Triangle countries, particularly on the work of tuna fishing, to be able to make the tuna industry realize that they must share in the social and ecological costs of taking care of the tuna spawning grounds within the Coral Triangle. We're very grateful to our ASEAN colleagues and their support for these initiatives, which was introduced by President Yudhoyono at the APEC Summit in Sydney. Cooperation at the regional level is crucial, as Hsien-Loong says. It's, you know, these ecological problems don't know any political borders, especially since we want to engage the consumers of our fresh, live seafood, our tuna, and our marine tourism. While the Coral Triangle produces the tuna, or spawns the tuna, the tuna goes elsewhere and is fished elsewhere and is consumed elsewhere. The consumers come from Japan, China, Europe, North Korea, and North America and Australia, and we want that they will be also made, that they will become more conscious about sharing in the responsibility of sustaining the existence of tuna. Singapore also plays a crucial role because it's the main transshipment point to the live reef fish trade from the Coral Triangle to the rest of the world. So aside from the Heart of Borneo, this Coral Triangle initiative is a massive initiative, and we need the support not only of the countries in the triangle, not only of the whole ASEAN, but of all the parts of the world that consume the tuna that comes from the Coral Triangle. Thank you.
Thank you, President Arroyo. Another question from the floor. We have some hands raised here, please.
Peter Schwartz from Global Business Network. You talked about the several blocs in the world and the other great nations of the region. ASEAN has been around for 40 years, but in the recent decade or two, China and India have taken off in a rather dramatic way. How do you see, say, Prime Minister Lee, the relationship to China and India and ASEAN as the whole region of Asia develops?
Well, we see it as very positive that China and India are taking off, and we see many opportunities in it for ASEAN to benefit from this transformation of Asia at the same time as we contribute to it. But in order to do that, we have to have a strong ASEAN, because otherwise, if you have two big, massive economies prospering away, and ASEAN is scattered 10 little individual economies, each one not very relevant to the world, we're going to be nowhere. Therefore, we have to be cohesive. That's one of the strong reasons, motivations for the ASEAN Charter to be concluded. And therefore, we also have to look beyond ASEAN to contribute towards the regional architecture of cooperation. And here is a big word, architecture. But all it means is that what is a structure by which Asian countries can work together with one another. And there are several structures which are in existence. They sort of overlap, they compete with each other somewhat. But it's an evolving process, and it's beginning to form. As Mr. Green says, it's like a cathedral. You build it first, and then eventually you see whether or which shape emerges. So we have APEC, which is an organization which brings both sides of the Pacific together. We have an ASEAN Plus 3 organization, which is ASEAN Plus Northeast Asian countries, meaning China, Japan, and Korea. That's ASEAN Plus 3. And then we have what we call the East Asia Summit, which is ASEAN Plus 3, but we broaden it to include India as well on the other side, Australia, New Zealand. And we think that what we would like to have is a region which has a structure of cooperation which embraces all the centers of vitality, which the East Asia Summit does, and at the same time is porous and open to the world and links up to the rest of the world, to Europe, to America, to South America, Africa, so that we prosper not by ourselves but within a globalized economy, and we have links which give other parts of the world stakes in ASEAN success and Asia's success. And this is the architecture which is coming about, which ASEAN is at the center of, and which we are doing our part to help to shape. Thank you, Prime Minister. A question from Klaus Schwab.
A very important element in the European Union is the joint currency, the euro. Now, is there any short-term, medium-term prospect of currency alignment? Because also in Europe, the euro was preceded by quite some period of currency alignment. And how much does the turmoil which we have seen the last days possibly advance such a project?
I think that such a project is a very, very long way off. I don't think it's going to happen while we are in office. I mean, looking all around on the dais, because the countries in Asia or even in Southeast Asia are at very different stages of economic development, have differently structured domestic economies, and also different monetary policy and inflation considerations, and political considerations. So to imagine that it is possible to bring it all together, first to align the currency exchange rates, and then to have a single central bank manager, the way it has happened in Europe. Europe took nearly 60 years. We've started off a long way behind that. I do not think it will be easy to bring about, and I don't think it should be the priority at this stage. I think we work together to cooperate, to facilitate the trade, the investments, the movements of professionals, the transportation linkages, integrate the economies, and as the economies integrate progressively, we can consider more ambitious things. Abdullah, you agree?
Well, yes, I agree with you. And we talk about China, about India. I think there's a belief among all of us that among all the countries associated with ASEAN, that we are strategic partners. We are strategic partners on the basis that there is mutual benefits to be derived from that. There is no threat at all. No one is a threat to another. This is very important. Even China itself has provided us a lot of guarantees that China is a true friend. For example, when we have the financial crisis, everybody was talking about the possibility of China revaluing the renminbi. And if that is done, we will be really facing a serious problem. But at the summit meeting of the first summit meeting of the ASEAN Plus 3, Jian was there. He gave assurance that China will not revalue the renminbi, whatever happens, because China regards ASEAN as a very important friend and would like to see the ASEAN overcome the problems of the financial crisis we faced at that time. And when we met again, he again gave us that assurance. Although he did say that that China was itself having problem, but because of the commitment that was given to ASEAN, then that commitment must be respected, and they continue to respect that. And in a way, I could regard that China in some way has assisted us to recover from the shock of the financial crisis. Thank you.
Stephen, you have something you'd like to add?
Just to underscore that I think, speaking from a business view that many would share, a full agreement that common currency and even coordination of currencies is a long way off. I think that this is many milestones down the road.
We're nearing the end of an hour already. It's hard to believe, but I think maybe we can take one more question and then maybe have a wrap-up. Prime Minister Lee, with you and your colleagues, if you have anything you'd like to close with. So, do we have another question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Arthur Mutambara from Zimbabwe. What is the future of national sovereignty? One of the challenges we're experiencing in Southern Africa and in Africa is national sovereignty. How much of national sovereignty are the individual countries prepared to give up in pursuit of regional integration? Isn't the logical conclusion to move from national sovereignty towards collective regional sovereignty and eventually global sovereignty? What is the future of national sovereignty?
This is a very good question because you are all nation states. So, Prime Minister Lee.
I think it's a gradual process. We are 10 sovereign nations. We make decisions for ourselves and we get together and make decisions jointly. Our traditional basis has been working on consensus, which means that you've got to get 10 countries saying, yes, okay, then we go along. The more members you have, the more difficult it is to reach a full consensus. On the other hand, there are many issues where it is not necessary to have everybody participate before we can act. And we need means by which we can agree that on a particular issue, even if not all the countries are ready, those which are ready can get together and move first, and the rest can move after, which is a set of rules of the game for the organization. And we have some of this. We call it various picturesque names. 2 plus X, which means any 2 can go and X can join in when they are ready. Or 10 minus X, which means if a small number are not ready, the rest will move. And then the few who have not joined can join later on. These are rules of the game. But to answer your question directly, I think it's an evolving position. The more institutionalized ASEAN is, the more there will be issues which will be decided collectively and which countries will have regularly to go along with, because we are part of a continuing organization, a relationship which we're doing business day by day, and one where we abide by the rules and we accept that today we go along, tomorrow, well, some other issue, the other countries go along. How far it goes is a matter of degree, even in Europe, which has gone very far towards a supranational organization in Brussels. On the issues which are national prerogatives, the countries guard their rights fiercely. We have not gone that far. To reach a full regional integration, I think will take a long time. Global integration and sovereignty, I don't think we will see ever. I think that's a safe answer.
Thank you, Prime Minister Lee. I think what I'm going to do is turn it back to you as the chair of this august group to, if there are other comments you would like to leave, thoughts you would like to leave with the audience tonight.
Well, I think we've covered the ground. This has been an eventful 40 years for ASEAN. We've come a long way. And at Davos, we are presenting our plans for the next phase. We can't see 40 years ahead. It's not possible. Even 10 years, there's a lot of mist and haze. But over the next 5-7 years, we have ambitions. We are serious about them. We know what we need to do. And I think if we have another ASEAN event here in 5 or 7 years' time, we'll have new items and new progress to report.
But before I formally thank our panelists, let me just point out that there is going to be an ASEAN reception in the Congress Hall lobby following this panel, and there will be an opportunity to interact with a number of the leaders at that time. And also, I think it's a great credit to the whole ASEAN organization that you're so well represented here tonight and show a united front. I think this is a great sign of the cohesiveness and the future potential for ASEAN. So please, if you would join me in thanking our panel very much for President.